Live from London, this is BBC News. More than 5,000 people are confirmed dead, 10,000 more are still missing in devastating floods in Libya's east.
All of his family is dead. He's asking me, what should I do? No one knows what should we do right now.
A destructive wall of water sweeps through the city of Derna. Bodies are still being recovered. As the death toll rises, we'll hear from witnesses on the ground, from the Red Cross and from a former foreign minister in Libya. Welcome to Verified Live on BBC News. Over the next half hour, we're going to focus entirely on the horrifying situation in Libya. More than 5,300 people are now known to have died in devastating floods that hit the east of the country. Well, let's talk live now to Mohamed Dayri, former Libyan foreign minister and former UNHCR official. Thank you so much for being here on the programme. Your reaction to the disaster that has hit your country? Well, Mohamed Dayri, we have to leave it there, but thanks for being so forthright and honest in your opinions. Thanks for joining us here on BBC News. Well, let me show you more of the pictures on the ground because we are still very much in the early stages since Sunday's floodwaters hit, and you can see some of the relief operations being carried out. It was described as doomsday by one Libyan journalist there in Derna. And when you look at the landscape, when you look at the power of the waters and the damage done, and you see what is happening with individuals just searching for their families. There's been an appeal from the authorities in the east for more international help, rescue teams. That's what they kept repeating. And as you see the skyline there, just the utter devastation. They need rescue teams because they are still hoping to pull out people from all of this, the collapsed buildings, the mud. But of course, all the while, there are reports of new bodies being washed up, being found, as the number of people who have perished in this devastation, as you can see there on the screen, is now over 5,300. Well, you're live with BBC News. Let's continue with this with Frank Gardner, our security correspondent, who's here in the studio with me. And Frank, it was fascinating listening there to a former foreign minister, Mohamed Dayri, so blunt in his assessment about the fact that you have polarised politics in Libya, and that is making the relief operations so much more difficult.
In Derna itself.
Chris Fawkes, thanks very much. Well, let's continue to assess the situation. Let's talk to Peter Millett, British ambassador to Libya from 2015 to 2018. Peter, thanks so much for being here on the programme. Your assessment of what we're seeing unfold there in Libya. Well, Peter Millett, thank you very much. We are almost out of time, so I will leave it there. But thanks for joining us and thanks for giving that assessment in terms of the political backdrop and the most urgent questions that need to be answered. And of course, that timeline is narrowing all the time with the searches that are going on for possible survivors. So let's end this half hour where we started, just returning to the sheer scale of this disaster. The death toll is already over 5,300, but those numbers are expected to rise quite markedly. That is what the assessment from all of the authorities there in the country are saying. Already people are being buried in mass graves around Derna, but that is just one of the cities worst affected. The focus obviously is on that, but also on helping the thousands of people who've been left with absolutely nothing. 34,000 people at least are without shelter. The aid agencies are trying to get supplies in, but just about everything is working against them. The infrastructure, the fractured politics in Libya, the magnitude of what is actually facing them. So stay with us on BBC News as we continue to report the latest on the ground there on this disaster in Libya. Welcome, this is BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines here. More than 5,000 people are confirmed dead in Libya. 10,000 more are still missing after devastating floods. The father, stepmother and uncle of Sarah Sharif are on their way back to the UK from Pakistan. 10-year-old Sarah was found dead at her home in Surrey last month. Search and rescue teams in Morocco reach mountain villages flattened by last week's earthquake. At least 2,900 people have been killed. And Ukraine's Air Force chief congratulates the pilots who attacked Russia's Black Sea Fleet in Crimea, causing a large fire at Sevastopol shipyard. Well, we'll have more on all of those stories. First, though, let's head to the BBC Sports Centre, round up the sport of the day. Sarah's there for us. Over to you. Hello.
Thank you very much, Matthew. Let's start with some cricket then, because Ben Stokes has blasted his way to his first century since returning to ODI cricket. He reached 100 in just 76 balls for England as they look to post a big score in the third match of this series with New Zealand. Plenty more on that and all the day's sports stories on the BBC Sport website and app. But that is it for me for the moment, Matthew.
Sarah, great stuff. Thanks very much. Let's return to that breaking news of the last little while. The father, stepmother and uncle of Sarah Sharif are returning to the UK from Pakistan. They left the country the day before the 10-year-old was found dead at a house in Woking in Surrey. Well, let's talk to our correspondents, Helen Wilkinson and also Caroline Davies, both following this story in the UK and also Pakistan. Helena, to you first of all, and tell us more about this latest development. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK.
I'm so Measley.
For more stories from across the UK, head to the BBC News website.
You're live with BBC News. Let's turn to Ukraine, because Ukraine has launched a substantial attack on the Russian Black Sea Fleet. Moscow says Ukraine attacked Sevastopol with 10 cruise missiles and 3 unmanned boats. Russia's Ministry of Defence says it successfully intercepted much of that attack, but 2 ships were damaged. So let's head to Kyiv, speak to our diplomatic correspondent Paul Adams. And Paul, what's your assessment of this attack, and the nature of the weapons used, I suppose, is more significant? Jeremy, we have to leave it there, but thank you so much for taking time to speak to us on that story. We're going to take a short break. When we're back, we'll have all the latest from the devastation of the floods of Libya. We'll get the latest on the ground, the latest on the political situation. And of course, the aid agencies are scrambling to actually get aid to Libya. So we'll have the latest on all the strands of that, which is very much our main story. See you here in just a bit. Don't go away. Live from London, this is BBC News. More than 5,000 people are confirmed to have died in Libya. 10,000 more are still missing after devastating floods.
All of his family is dead. He's asking me, what should I do? No one knows what should we do right now.
The father, stepmother and uncle of Sarah Sharif are on their way back to the UK from Pakistan. 10-year-old Sarah was found dead at her home in Surrey last month. And search and rescue teams in Morocco reach mountain villages flattened by last week's earthquake. At least 2,900 people have been killed. Hello and welcome back to Verified Live. We begin this hour with the horrifying situation in Libya. More than 5,000 people are now known to have died in devastating floods in the east of the country. Around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Well, let's take a look at some other stories making the headlines here in the UK, because a man has been arrested on suspicion of possessing a dangerously out-of-control dog following an attack on an 11-year-old girl in Birmingham. Hannah Pawn suffered serious arm and shoulder injuries when she was attacked by an American Bully XL and Staffordshire Bull Terrier crossbreed on Saturday. 4 people are facing fraud charges over the collapse of the UK bakery chain Patisserie Valerie. They include the former chief financial officer. The chain collapsed suddenly in 2018 with more than 900 jobs and 70 branches lost. The Serious Fraud Office says the suspects concealed £10 million in debts. They're due to appear in court next month. And a British soldier has been charged in Canada with second-degree murder. Craig Gibson is accused of assaulting Brett Sheffield in Toronto in August. Mr. Sheffield was taken to hospital but died 2 days later. He appeared in court on Monday, charged with his murder. Those are some of the stories making the headlines here in the UK. You're live with BBC News. Now, the father, stepmother and uncle of Sarah Sharif are returning to the UK from Pakistan. They left the country the day before the 10-year-old was found dead at a house in Woking in Surrey. The BBC has been told that Irfan Sharif, Benash Batul and Faisal Malik were not arrested when they left Pakistan on a plane to Dubai. Well, just a little earlier, I spoke to our correspondents Helena Wilkinson and also Caroline Davis, who've been following the stories both in the UK and in Pakistan. Remarkable pictures. We're going to take a break. When we're back, we'll have all the latest headlines and a full roundup of all the business news of the day. That's here in just a minute or two. Welcome, this is BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines. More than 5,000 people are confirmed to have died in Libya. 10,000 more are still missing after devastating floods. Ukraine's Air Force chief congratulates the pilots who attacked Russia's Black Sea fleet in Crimea, causing a large fire at a Sevastopol shipyard. Consumer prices continue to rise in the US, driven by a jump in the cost of fuel. And the BBC speaks to the US star Olivia Rodrigo about her music, breaking records and overnight success. Well, all of that is coming up in a moment or two. Let's round up a busy business day. Ben Thompson is here. And Ben, good afternoon.
Afternoon, Matthew. Thanks very much. We're going to start with that story you mentioned there, news that in the United States, inflation continues to rise. The latest official figures show that prices are rising at their fastest rate in more than a year. That's driven by a surge in the cost of fuel that has pushed up US consumer prices by 0.6%. But if you take out the pretty volatile cost of food and fuel, the underlying rate was half that, coming in at 0.3%. Now, it could give America's central bank some breathing room, encouraging the Federal Reserve to keep interest rates on hold next Wednesday. So let's take you live now to our North America business correspondent, Erin Delmore, who's in New York. And Erin, what do these figures tell us right now about the state of the US economy? I'm going to stay with iPhone, but an older version right now, because Apple has been forced to defend its iPhone 12 after a French watchdog ordered a halt to its sales. They've cited breaches of European radiation exposure limits. Apple said in a statement that the iPhone 12 that was launched in 2020 was certified by multiple international bodies as compliant with global radiation standards. And within the last few minutes, the range has confirmed it is finalising a £5 million deal to buy the Wilko brand after a rescue deal for the wider business fell through. The agreement, which is set to be announced later on Wednesday, means it will own Wilko's website and could choose to some of the stock and sell some of its products. The deal, though, will not prevent Wilko shops from disappearing from Britain's high street. 400 stores are set to close by early October, leaving thousands of staff out of work. Latest figures from the European Union show industrial production dropped by 1.1% month-on-month in July. That's a 2.2% fall across the Eurozone versus July of last year. The numbers were weaker than expected. And the European Commission is launching an investigation into Chinese state subsidies for electric cars. Officials in Brussels say they want to protect EU producers from the unfair competition of cheaper Chinese electric vehicle imports. Those are your business stories around the world and across the UK. You're watching BBC News.
BBC News, bringing you different stories from across the UK. For more stories from across the UK, head to the BBC News website.
You're live with BBC News. Let's get more now on our top story. More than 5,300 people are now known to have died in the devastating floods in the east of Libya. Earlier on the programme, we heard from Mohamed Diary, a former Libyan foreign minister and a former UNHCR official. He gave me his reaction to this disaster. Mark Savage with that report. Just a quick pointer, because if you head to the BBC website, plenty more on Olivia Rodrigo. That full interview, we were just playing part of it. I've got a few heartbreaks left in me. The headline, fascinating longer interview there that Mark Savage has done about the extraordinary career, these early years of the US singer. You're watching BBC News. Now, let's turn to another story, because the issue of voter ID has become more of a global concern in recent elections. The UK government is being warned that there is a significant threat of disruption to the next general election because of a new requirement that everyone must have voter ID. The Elections Minister has said she is confident in the ability of local authorities to roll out voter ID nationwide, but both the Electoral Commission and local government staff responsible for polling are calling for changes. Here's our political correspondent, Damien Grammaticus. Well, just a quick pointer. In about 40 minutes' time, we'll talk to Alice Jones, who you saw in that piece, so she will join me live on today's programme. We're going to take a short break. When we're back, we'll have all the latest on those devastating floods in Libya. We'll talk to a doctor in Benghazi. We'll get the latest on that moving story. We'll also have the latest details from Morocco and also the Sarah Sharif story with major developments in the last couple of hours. So all of that is coming up in the next little while after weather with Chris Fawkes.
Hello there. I suppose a reversal of fortunes weather-wise. Yesterday, Scotland and Northern Ireland had the best of the day's weather. What I would see is across southern areas, you're more likely to see outbreaks of rain, but the rain could reach right the way across northern Scotland as well.
Live from London, this is BBC News. More than 5,000 people are confirmed dead in Libya. 10,000 more are still missing after devastating floods.
All of his family is dead. He's asking me, what should I do? No one knows what should we do right now.
The father, stepmother and uncle of Sarah Sharif are on their way back to the UK from Pakistan. The 10-year-old was found dead at her home in Surrey last month. Search and rescue teams in Morocco reached mountain villages flattened by last week's earthquake. At least 2,900 people have been killed. And Ukraine's Air Force chief congratulates the pilots who attacked Russia's Black Sea fleet in Crimea, causing a large fire at a Sevastopol shipyard. Hello and welcome. I'm Matthew Amroliwala and welcome to Verified Live. 3 hours of breaking stories and checking out the truth behind them. Well, we begin with the horrifying situation in Libya. More than 5,000 people are now known to have died in devastating floods in the east of the country. Well, these are the pictures from Derna, with people describing a tsunami of water hitting the city after 2 dams collapsed. More than 10,000 people are still missing. The authorities fear the death toll will eventually double. Helena Wilkinson and Carrie Davis, thanks both of you for bringing us the latest on that developing story. Well, around the world and across the UK, you're watching BBC News. Well, let's stay with a couple of stories making the headlines here in the UK, because a man has been arrested on suspicion of possessing a dangerously out-of-control dog following an attack on an 11-year-old girl in Birmingham. Anna Pawn suffered serious arm and shoulder injuries when she was attacked by an American Bully XL and Staffordshire Bull Terrier crossbreed while shopping with her sister on Saturday. West Midlands police say the dogs are now in a secure kennel. A man who entered the grounds of Windsor Castle in an attempt to kill the late Queen believed he was a Star Wars-inspired character who had to right a historical wrong. Jaswant Singh Charlie was armed with a crossbow when he was arrested in 2021. He admitted a charge under the Treason Act and to making threats to kill and possessing an offensive weapon. And 4 people are facing fraud charges over the collapse of the UK bakery chain Patisserie Valerie. They include the former chief financial officer. The chain collapsed suddenly in 2018 with more than 900 jobs and 70 branches being lost. You're live with BBC News. Let's return to the horrifying situation in Libya. More than 5,300 people are now known to have died in the devastating floods in the east of the country. Good interview, more on the BBC website on that story and the rest of the headlines here on BBC News. Welcome to BBC News. Let's turn to our main headlines this half hour. More than 5,000 people are confirmed dead in Libya. 10,000 more are still missing after devastating floods. Wet weather and strike action take their toll on the UK economy. Official figures show the economy shrank again last month. The police watchdog will investigate how Manchester officers handled the case of Andrew Malkinson. He spent 17 years in jail for a crime he didn't commit. Well, more on all of those important stories in a moment. First, though, let us head to the BBC Sports Centre. Mark Edwards is there. And Mark, good evening.
Good evening, Matthew. We're going to start with some cricket, where it's been another record-breaking day for Ben Stokes, the all-rounder, smashing his way into the history books with the highest score by an England batter in a one-day international as he hammered a brutal 182 in the third ODI against New Zealand at the Oval. Stokes had only come out of one-day retirement to play in this series and the World Cup in India next month, but the Test captain bringing up the record with this 6, one of 9 maximums and 15 fours in his 124-ball innings. That shot beating the previous best of 180 made by Jason Roy in 2018. Well, that innings helped England to 368 all out. Stokes ably supported by Dawid Malan. England did lose their last 4 wickets for just 8 runs, but New Zealand into bat and are currently 34 for 3. The series stands at 1 each going into this one. The sides will then meet in the final one day on Friday at Lord's. At the Davis Cup, Great Britain are playing the first of their 3 round-robin matches in Manchester, kicking things off against Australia as they look to get through this group stage. And that's all your sport for now. Back to you, Matthew.
Mark, thanks very much. Straight to breaking news from Westminster. News that Tobias Ellwood, chair of the Commons Defence Select Committee, has quit. He'd been under pressure for comments he made recently about the Taliban administration in Afghanistan. So let's head straight to our political correspondent, Nick Erdley, who's across this story. Nick, will talk about the politics in a moment, but just remind our viewers what those controversial comments were. The 6 o'clock news is next, but that's it from Verified Live. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Hello there. The weather was a lot drier today across England and Wales with